Is this Noam Chomsky?
Yeah, speaking.
Oh, wow.
Hey, Mr. Chomsky, wow.
Wow. Thanks for being on the show.
Okay, sorry to keep you waiting.
Oh, no problem.
It's okay. It's all right. We're not very important people.
Yeah, we're not.
Every person is an important person.
Oh,
this
that's
is why I
so
like
sweet
this
of
guy.
you to say, Noam. Thank you. What should we call? Do you prefer to be called Noam or Mr. Chomsky?
Yeah, that's fine. No, first name's okay if you can pronounce it.
Bear?
Well, we'd like to thank you for being on the show. Thanks so much. And I guess we're just going to start rolling with some questions. We're kind of affiliated with the punk rock industry and stuff, so we're going to start out with kind of some of the stuff that you've done within that industry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like we've noticed that you have audio CDs out through Epitaph and Alternative Tentacles. Do you work with like Jello Biafra and Brett Gershowitz? Or?
No, I'm a kind of from the Stone Age. I know that, literally. I know that it exists. I know it's a live culture, obviously exciting things going on. I'm happy to, when people ask me to talk for, 8 minutes for side of a record, that's fine with me, but I don't know any more than that.
Oh, yeah, okay, cool.
Not a big Bad Religion fan.
No. Well, I loved the title. I couldn't resist that.
Oh,
in fact,
good.
I found that for years, when you give talks all over the place, people want things signed. But for quite a few years, one of the main things that people wanted signed all over the world, incidentally, was that record.
That 7-inch that I asked you about? Oh.
Yeah.
Did they just approach you? Just in there, like, we want to put this out?
I think they approached me. I didn't know who they were, but I was taken by the name. So they just asked me to talk for 8 minutes about, I think it was the first Gulf War. And I said I had no way of doing it, so they sent me a tape or something. And so I talked for 8 minutes, and then that came back. And, there was a song on the other side, which I couldn't make head or tail out of, but they said it was an anti-war song. So I sent it to a friend who had a teenage daughter, and she wrote me a very eloquent disquisition on it, what it meant, where it fit into the punk rock scene and everything else. That was quite illuminating.
Wow, that's awesome.
Well, we're glad that you find our scene illuminating. We want to also put out, when someone does come up to you and ask you for an autograph, that's got to be kind of weird, I would imagine. It's not really what you're trying to get across is fame and fortune, obviously.
Yeah. Well, people who want it. I get a ton of letters from people who just want an autograph. If people like it, well, I don't like it myself very much, but it means something to people. So a lot of people just collect autographs.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, there's another thing I wanted to ask you. In punk rock, a lot of people wear like anarchy symbols and stuff, and you actually are an anarchist, right?
I would say so, but the word means so many different things, I almost hesitate to use it. But the way I mean it, yeah.
Well, then...
How do you mean anarchy?
In my view, anarchy is not a definite fixed position. It's a kind of tendency in human history and thought and action, which is based on some fundamental principles. One basic principle is that authority and hierarchy are not self-justifying. They carry a burden of proof. They have to prove that they're justified, and they usually can't. And if they can't, they should be dismantled. And that's true of everything from patriarchal families to international affairs. Now, sometimes I think they can justify it. Like if I'm walking down the street with my 3-year-old granddaughter, and she runs into the street, and I grab her and pull her back. That's authority, but I think I can give a justification for it. However, that's what is required. It's the person who exercises the authority who has to justify it.
Yeah,
and that's in any situation of hierarchy and domination. And if you pursue that, you take step by step toward a much more free society.
Right. So, when you think of like anarchy, you don't think of it as like obviously people running around, just...
No, it can be a very organized society. In fact, if you take a look at the really serious, mostly European anarchist movements, they were trying to work out ways of organizing a complex industrial agrarian society, like Spain in 1936, which is the peak moment. No, they weren't just people. They were running the economy. They were doing it successfully. Workers took over factories. There were collectives in the countryside. They worked out arrangements of interchange. It was a complex movement.
Now, you got involved in activism during the Vietnam War. Is that correct?
No, not really. It was from childhood. Actually, I wrote my first political article in 1939. The 1950s were a pretty quiet period. So it's sort of, in fact, of my 8 decades, that's the one decade when I wasn't particularly politically active. When the 1960s started with the Vietnam War and Civil Rights Movement, I got back sort of into my normal state.
Right. So how did being an activist affect your personal life? Because that's not
quite a lot. When I was very conscious of it. When I really got back into it intensively in the early '60s, I thought about it. I mean, you can't just put your foot in; you go all the way. And I knew it would seriously affect what was a very pleasant existence. I mean, we had a couple of kids. They were growing up. I liked my work. My wife had a good job. We lived in, we managed to get ourselves a nice place to live. It was just a pleasant life. And I knew I'd be giving up a lot of it, which happened, of course.
Yeah.